I felt encouraged, I felt supported, I was motivated, and I felt better as a teacher. I was amazed by it and so thrilled. And that's how I find Scoot. I find them to be supportive. They give us tools. My point person, Dominique, he is more supportive and understanding than my school district had been, especially towards the end of my career. Towards the end of my career, I really felt invisible. And a little less than that, because if I did something wrong, I was certainly going to find out about that right quick. But if I did anything well, no news is good news. Somebody taking interest in what I do and something that I worked on and recognizing me. Those things matter, especially when you've done this a long time. So my name is Rob. The kids call me Coach Rob. I was also a tennis coach. I go for mostly high school jobs when I can ideally get those. I was a high school English teacher for more than 28 years, so I'm used to the high school age too. That was always what I liked to work with. During COVID, I had realized that I hadn't really taken care of my own life, personally, emotionally, physically. So I was able to retire, but I was only age 55, and so I worked out a plan where I would definitely have to keep working. And I've looked for other jobs, but really I know how to be a teacher. That's what I am and that's what I know. And I didn't really prepare for any other careers. So substituting allows me to work with students, which is my favorite part, but it keeps me away from the hardest parts, which are kids that I would take home with me mentally. And of course, all of the paperwork. As an English teacher, it was just so much trying to read essays, especially in public school classrooms. In California, my student load would be somewhere between 150 to 160 students for the school year. And teaching writing is really important too, but it's not what my passion was. It's not why I became an English teacher. I didn't enjoy writing essays in school, and the reason I became a really good writer was because I read a lot, which I liked, and because my father would read my papers before turning them in and could do a lot more on my individual paper than the public school teacher could do when he or she was reading hundreds of papers. Really, so it keeps me enjoying things, keeps me happy, and lets me do what I really like to do most. And of course, what I discovered was, as a public school teacher, there were a lot of things that we never anticipated when we became a teacher. Things that are not as enjoyable and are away from the focus of wanting to help students thrive. I'm a tennis instructor, and I like to play pickleball a lot. I have my 2 dogs, and I just bought an e-bike, and I run my errands on a bicycle rather than having to take the car out. I discovered Scoot when I was first entering what we'll call my retirement, and I was looking for jobs. And I like Scoot because, first of all, it pays well. Second of all, I found my point person, Dominique. He is more supportive and understanding than my school district had been, especially towards the end of my career. I have an issue with one of my placements. It turned out to be a rather difficult school, and Dominique was just so helpful and supportive. I was so fearful of having to meet with her about the incident in particular that was raised by a principal, because I expected it to be unsupportive, which is what I had become used to at my own school. And it was the exact opposite. I felt encouraged, I felt supported, I was motivated, and I felt better as a teacher after this whole incident occurred. I was amazed by it and so thrilled. And that's how I find Scoot. I find them to be supportive. They give us tools. I signed on with them last year, but I really didn't have them often. I was still working in my school district as a substitute, but the lack of support, the lack of empathy continued, and they pay less. The advantage they had was I could often get placements before the morning of the job. And it was helpful to go to sleep knowing where I was going to be the next day. That's the one shortcoming I have with Scoot, is just that I'm on call at 6 a.m. hoping that the phone's going to ring. And they've been placing me at a school that I particularly like working at. And the more I get to go to that school, the happier I am. And that can't always be, but it's nice that I've been able to get a lot of work in a place that knows me, so I have the sense of community as opposed to showing up as a stranger. When they place me at the school that I like, and I'm always like, oh yeah, that's my go-to, or that's my jam. Oh, it just starts my morning off being really happy. And the school had told Scoot that they really liked me. And I found out from the school that Scoot had told the school that they really liked me. And so this was so much more of a positive, warm experience. And it just feels good to get positive feedback. Whereas in the public school system, you wouldn't get really any feedback unless it was negative. And when they did teacher reviews, the best you could get was satisfactory. Most teachers are desiring to be successful, particularly in the classroom. And so to us, a satisfactory is like getting a C. You couldn't get any better than that, though. And here I get a weekly report, comes out from Scoot with things to help and support us or just give us an update. Or we have our point person who, as I said, mine has been incredibly supportive and empathetic. And she compliments me on being motivated and professional. And it's hard to be a substitute, just like it's hard to be a teacher. Kids often, just because you're a substitute, automatically take for granted that you're in to do a job. They think, oh, free day, field trip kind of thing for them. And so it can be a real challenge that way. And they also will react negatively. With my placements with Scoot, though, the students have embraced me. And as I said, they call me Coach Rob, and they'll often be excited to see me, not just because it means their teacher's not there, but just because they know that we have a good experience working together. So it's mutual, it's a mutually good situation. And Scoot likes that. I believe Scoot's really in favor of the students liking it and, of course, their teachers liking it. There's one student I was teaching. I actually had a long-term assignment last year for 2 months, and this is at my favorite school. And it was just always such a really nice student. And other teachers feel the same way. He's one of those kids that really shines. He makes a great effort. He's not necessarily like the top A student, but he was always pleasant, and outside of the class when you would see him, he would say hi. And I knew he was interested in music, doing his own rap and his own sound production. And I had a CD collection, over 300 CDs. I thought, you know what? I'm going to give him this CD collection. And he even said to me, he said, well, you could sell these. And I said, yeah, but I'd feel better giving them to you than that money would just make me feel. And I had that job last October through November. This year, when I started subbing, the first day that I returned to the site as a regular sub, not as a long-term sub, the first student who saw me was out of the entire campus, just by coincidence. I was going just to report to the office for work. And he's like, Rob! He's on the first name basis with me. He doesn't even call me the Coach Rob part. And when we embraced and we talked, and he had shared that his grandma had just passed away, but he was still, his spirits were up, but he was going to have to go to the funeral. I was touched, though, that he recognized me and he shared that with me, and that he has the CDs. And as I've been going back to the site, he's a point person for me. I see him, and you can't help but feel the joy when he sees me. And yesterday, when I was leaving the campus, it's of course heavy traffic area, and he's on his mountain bike, and he actually led the way for me to cross the street. And he's, come on, follow me kind of thing. And he was riding alongside of me, and I slowed down, and so he could give me a high five. And this is the kind of relationship that I've had, and he's not the only one, particularly at this school where I appear a lot more often. It's hard when you appear for one day to create a relationship that is deep like that. But honestly, there's nothing in my life that makes me feel better than the experience that I have working with and some other kids that I've really bonded with. And again, as a substitute, you don't expect those kinds of connections. I think when I've had middle school classes, that's been the most challenging, and the rewarding experience is getting through the day without losing my temper and getting the lesson across and learning how to be supportive to the kids and recognize that I'm a guest in their space, respecting that, and also understanding what I felt like as a student when we had a sub, which was, yes, even when you like the teacher, it's just definitely a break. When you don't have the teacher, it's going to be an easier day for the most part. Follow the tips that are given by Scoot. They give a lot of really good tips and help with the preparation, and definitely reach out to your point person with concerns that you might have or difficult situations. You'll find that, at least my experience, has been incredibly supportive. It's not punitive. They don't come down on you. They embrace you in a way where they want you to feel good and to be successful. So take advantage of those things. Again, as a 28-year teacher, I use the Growth app to help me, thinking, oh, he knows how to do everything and stuff. I didn't assume that I did. So I'd say, yeah, those are the most essential things. And to be a professional. And if you follow Scoot's tips, that'll be included in there. They'll help you, especially if you haven't been in the classroom since you were last a student in a classroom. As somebody with a lot of teaching experience, I did the first one and I said, yeah, that was worthwhile. My favorite thing was the teacher feedback form. And normally I would have just left a few comments on a Post-it, something trite, or a list of students that were being difficult. But the form allows you to include critical feedback, but also has a place for positive feedback. And I've used that form, and the teachers have said, wow, thank you for that form. And said, usually I don't get any feedback at all. And they really appreciated it. And I appreciate the structure. It makes it much easier to do. You don't have to rack your brains. And so that was just a great, great tool. Even after teaching 28 years, I didn't have a template or anything set up to do that so simply. And I just run off copies of it, and I can give that for any teacher, and whatever the grade is, whatever the background of the school. When I was a classroom teacher, I wanted to know from my subs, how is my class behaving? Not as a reflection on the sub, but I wanted to know, how are my students treating somebody who's new and different in the classroom? And are they doing what they're supposed to? And so this form it's an easy way to make sure that I'm touching base with the teacher and allowing them to have a glimpse of what's going on when they're not there. Great agency. They're really good. They're more supportive than my school district that I had devoted a lot of my time. They pay better, and they pay weekly, which is an advantage because school districts tend to pay at the end of the next month. That makes budgeting a challenge, and even with a pension, I found it a real struggle. And that's one of the reasons I devoted myself more to Scoot this year than to any other school district. There's opportunities in other school districts, but again, I'll trade the comfort of knowing about a job ahead of time for that morning call because they actually offer other perks. I was surprised that I had gotten a $5 Starbucks credit because I had earned a number of hours or so. I never expected anything like that. And it's something. It's somebody recognizing that you're putting in time and effort for them, and they're just saying thank you. Here is another sign where somebody was paying attention and showing some appreciation, interest in what I'm doing, why I'm doing, how I'm doing. Those things matter, especially when you've done this a long time. I've often, towards the end of my career, I really felt invisible. And a little less than that, because if I did something wrong, I was certainly going to find out about that right quick. But if I did anything well, it was just up to myself and my students to acknowledge it. And students no news is good news. There's an unfortunate state of the public school classroom. There should be a lot more good news. I want to use two words. You can hyphenate it. Warm and fuzzy.